What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to the SI Sooners podcast. Man, Oklahoma's football season is over. I wondered if we would get it in. I really did. And we did. We got it in. We're all happy about that. But you know what? Even though the season's over, it just feels like things are just kind of starting to get interesting right now, January 6th. We're going to tell you all about the latest comings and goings, who's in, who's out. We're going to tell you about Texas making big news over the weekend. Hard to believe. The Heisman went out last night. National championship game is coming up in a few weeks. We'll break all those down and put an Oklahoma spin on it for you. Also, OU basketball right in the middle of Murderer's Row, Ryan.
Yeah, brutal stretch for OU basketball. And look, just because the season ended, it doesn't mean that the news stops rolling in, John, as we've been run, pretty ragged ever since that Cotton Bowl victory that we were down in Arlington for.
It has been a busy time. That's Ryan Chapman. He's in Norman. I'm John Hoover. I'm in Tulsa. Want to thank you guys, as always, for listening to the SI Sooners podcast. Football season's over, as I said, so what that means for us is we're podcasting now once a week, unless big news happens. You're always seeing stuff pop up on your phone, so you never know when you're going to get a surprise podcast, but we're going to try and podcast once a week every Wednesday. Want to thank you all for also watching on my YouTube channel. We are a Fan Nation affiliate, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. You can always find what Ryan and I and others write about the Sooners every day, literally every day, at SI Sooners, allsooners.com. Okay, Ryan, let's start with the big stuff. Roster moves for Lincoln Riley and his crew. Man, this is where we're at. I'm going to comment on that later, but there's been a lot of them. And I want to say, I don't think it's time to panic. Obviously, but there are a few guys that are either surprising or puzzling or maybe just a little alarming, Ryan.
Yeah, and these days, John, it seems like you can't just worry about who's going to the NFL draft, who's staying, who's going, because now you've got the lovely transfer portal, which is about to be, I think, the bane of every coach's existence 90% of the time. We've seen a ton of Sooners hit the portal, John, along with those that have announced for the NFL draft, and it just feels like we knew this was coming after the first year of Alex Grinch and implementing his defensive philosophy. That offseason between 19 and 20, you saw a lot of guys kind of shipped out. We've seen sort of a miniature second wave of defensive guys enter the portal. And then, of course, the quarterback room just keeps taking hit after hit as Mordecai and Morris are both gone, headed south. Mm-hmm.
We're going to break them down for you all into three categories. There's a bunch, okay? So keep in mind it's middle of the day on Wednesday, and this thing is moving pretty fast. So some of it may have changed by the time you listen to us. Some of it may have changed by the time we get done talking, frankly. I just saw an alert pop up on my phone, but we're going to keep going. We're going to plow through. Listen, if that is the case, if news changes, you know what to do. Go to allsooners.com. We're going to have the latest. Okay, Ryan, first category, the I don't knows. Ronnie Perkins, Ramondre Stevenson, Eric Swenson, and LaRon Stokes. The big ones, of course, are Perkins and Stevenson. I don't have inside information on this at the moment, but I don't think either one of them is coming back. I think we could know something real soon, like probably today, tomorrow. Knowing our luck with this thing, they're making their announcement right now while we're podcasting. But I think Swenson and Stokes are big guys too, for reasons that we're going to mention coming up. Ryan, you got a feel on any one of those four guys might do?
Yeah, I feel like the one that I would absolutely be stunned is if Ramondre Stevenson returns to Norman next season. I would just absolutely be flabbergasted. I don't have anything, any inside knowledge like you said, but you just talk about what the running back position has become in football, specifically in the NFL. It seems like unless you're one of those top 1, 2, 3 guys that's going to get the mega contract, it's all about how much tread is on the tires and can you come in and do a job for 2 or 3 years. And it just doesn't make a ton of sense for Ramondre Stevenson to come back to Norman for those reasons, John. He's going to put more tread on the tires. And the 2 or 3 things I've kind of identified with what I think Stevenson needs to improve on. Okay, his high-end speed, that is what it is. He's not going to get any faster coming back to Oklahoma, so that's not going to change at all. A little bit of that field vision. I mean, I feel like an NFL coaching staff's going to be like, we would rather just work with you here in the building, specifics to our scheme, and then kind of being used out of the backfield. He's flashed at times consistency in that passing game, and then he just kind of has a quarter where things are a little wonky, a little off. So, like, that, I guess, would be a reason to return to Norman, but that main thing, John, of the tread on the tires and that top-end speed, I just don't see any real reason for Ramondre Stevenson to come back next season unless he just wants to chase a national championship.
Yeah, you're right. I feel that way about Perkins, too. He probably has maxed out in college. Not that he can't get better next year and have a better year next year. I think he can. But why not get paid doing it, and more than just potential NIL paid? Next category, he gone. That is Creed Humphrey, no doubt. Could have gone pro last year, so why stick around for another year? He's gone, NFL. Adrian Ealy, this one hurts, and to me is a bit surprising. He's arguably the best of the 4 Sooners offensive linemen, not named Creed. All Big 12. He had big upside for his senior year. He's off to the NFL. Trey Brown, this one was an easy one. Senior. He's probably never going to be hotter in the eyes of the NFL scouts than he is right now. He had that mic drop pick against Iowa State in the Big 12 title game, and he's going to test great at the Combine or Pro Day. And then Trey Norwood, didn't see that one coming, off to the NFL. Surprising, but you know what? Coming off an injury last year, probably smart on his part. So transfer portal. TJ Pledger, the transfer portal, to me, this one hurts. Again, he was a really solid backup to Ramondre. And right now, if Stevenson leaves, he's probably going to get a lot of carries next year for a team that might play for the Big Skinny Trophy, right? So Charleston Rambo, transfer portal, that one hurts. Disappointing junior season, but still, he's a guy that obviously has got a lot of talent. So say what you want about him. He's probably fallen down the depth chart a little bit more every time one of those 5-star freshman receivers comes in. Tanner Mordecai, you mentioned transfer portal. Listen, this is important. It always hurts to lose your backup quarterback if he's played, which Tanner has. And don't forget, he came in the Texas game and he allowed Spencer Rattler to kind of settle down. And if you remember right, that changed the entire complexion of the Oklahoma season. So don't undervalue Mordecai leaving. It's big. Even if Caleb Williams is the backup next year, it's big. Chandler Morris, transfer portal. Even Lincoln Riley said that one puzzled him a little bit, so that's weird. Jalen Conyers, transfer portal, fine. He probably wasn't going to get much time ahead of those guys ahead of him. Robert Barnes, transfer portal. He needed to go somewhere he was going to play. Simple as that. John Michael Terry, transfer portal. You know what? Go ahead and act like John Michael Terry leaving doesn't matter. You're wrong. It does. He was playing great. He was having a great senior season. He was having his best season of his career. And he's a backup. He's a very good backup to an All-American, Nick Benito. So losing that depth, when you're trying to chase a national championship, Ryan, losing that depth hurts. What are your thoughts on those guys that are leaving?
Yeah, I think that what you've hit on right there, John, the championship depth is really what's going to take the biggest hit, because like we saw, as far as the guys that are really going to impact the starting lineup, Ealy really hurts there along the offensive front, just because any year you can bring back as many offensive linemen as possible. Any new combination kind of throws a little hitch in the offensive line. So if you could have brought back 4 or 3, depending on what Swinson does, and just try to replace Creed and maybe put Anton Harris in there, I think that is a much easier hill to climb trying to chase a championship. But the puzzling ones, like you said, the TJ Pledger could be in line for a really big next season as far as what the opportunity just is because of what we've seen out of Ramondre Stevenson this year and where he might go. The Rambo one, though, John, I don't think the Sooners are going to miss Rambo as much as you might think. On paper, yes, he had a great career at Oklahoma, but this is a guy that over the course of this season, I found myself asking, why is he continuing to get the run out there? Why not just put Marvin Mims? Why not put Theo Weiss out there? If Hazelwood comes back and is as healthy as everyone hopes he'll be, I don't see where Charleston Rambo's going to fit into that puzzle. So I understand that one, but that real killer is the depth with John Michael Terry, like you said, TJ Pledger, and then the hit to the offensive line, because I honestly think this is wild to say, John, out of what we've seen out of the last 5 years in Norman, I think the secondary is going to be all right.
Here's the third category. He back. Okay, this is the good news. Isaiah Thomas, Nick Benito, Perrion Winfrey, Marquise Hayes. all announced that they were coming back. Tyrese Robinson, we think, may have announced on Twitter, put something out there. I'm probably too old to understand stuff like this from young people on Twitter nowadays. Stacey Wilkins, we hear. He kind of opted out last year, middle of the season, after he couldn't win the starting job at left tackle. Remember, he was supposed to take that left tackle spot from Swenson, but never really did. And then Anton Harrison passed him on the depth chart, so he opted out. But apparently he's working out, getting stronger, getting bigger, getting faster, and he's reportedly coming back. That could make up for losing Ely for sure, especially when you look at Anton Harrison as one of the tackles. Again, depending on what Swenson does, I think they're kind of fine there on the offensive line if Harrison and Wilkins develop. And then, Ryan, the big ones, obviously, Kennedy Brooks and Jalen Redmond, both of those guys also opted out last year. They're coming back, Lincoln Riley said this week. So suddenly, Ramondre Stevenson, I guess that was last week, Ramondre suddenly, if he's leaving, also in the possibility Ronnie Perkins leaving the defensive line, if you get Redmond and Kennedy Brooks back, doesn't sound quite so bad if those guys leave. They're all Big 12 type of players, Ryan.
Yeah, and that's what's so wild about this is because if you ask me at any point this season who is the best football player for the Sooners, I would have told you Ronnie Perkins. But he might be the easiest between him and Ramondre Stevenson to replace his production just because of the depth that we've talked about that's been developed. Now Jalen Redmond comes back into the fold, and you don't have to have those conversations about does he need to slide inside, can he stay outside? Well, you've got that core on the inside. You've got Winfrey, Ellison, Isaiah Thomas has shown the ability to get in there, slide inside. So you've got that flexibility now. Just play Jalen Redmond wherever you think he's going to make the biggest impact and not have to plug him in at tackle because you're worried about the need, things like that. So just being able to bring Benito back and Isaiah Thomas back, if LaRon Stokes is another guy that decides he's going to come back and play for this team, you might just be swapping out a weapon for a weapon there on that defensive line, which has quickly become the strength of this football team, John.
Okay, people, I'm going to say this. This is the age we live in. This is what college football is now. It's what it's become. Every team, every year is going to go through this type of attrition. Listen, you people wanted college football free agency. This is what it looks like. This is the price of giving more and more and more freedom to the players. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying from where we were to where we're going, this is what it looks like. And listen, if you think this is crazy, just wait until they pass the new rule about immediate eligibility for one-time transfers and the name, image, and likeness legislation. The stuff you're seeing right now, that's nothing. After those new rules pass, that's when you're really going to start to see players jumping from school to school. Up next on the SI Sooners podcast, the Heisman Trophy went out last night. The national championship game is up next. 1 year from now, will we be podcasting about Oklahoma being in the conversation for both? Hey, listen up. Winter's here, okay? But you know the seasons in Oklahoma. Cold one day, hot the next. That's a lot of work for your heating and air unit. But the guys at Trade Pros, they got you covered. Sign up for one of their no-hassle service plans. You can go pro, become elite, or the best deal's the MVC, most valuable customer. They'll come out twice a year and tune up your AC and your furnace. You get priority scheduling, and you get additional discounts. Just call Caleb or Carrie at Trade Pros, 405-249-7290, or go to TradeProsOKC.com or look them up on Facebook. Trade Pros. That's one word, Trade Pros Heat and Air. Follow SI Sooners on Twitter at all_Sooners. Find Ryan at Radios Ryan. And I'm at John E. Hoover. Our website is allsooners.com. We are a Fan Nation affiliate, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. Remember now, our content is free for now. For now. So jump on board now. We have no memberships, no subscriptions, no credit cards. Just click and enjoy. Find the video version of this here podcast on my YouTube channel, John Hoover Media. And yes, guys, I still need your help. If you're watching us at that original channel, that channel is going away. Don't ask me when. It could be soon. It might not be very soon, but help us out. All my stuff is going to be over at this channel. If you're just listening on the podcast, I'm pointing to the sky. This channel. So what I need y'all to do is jump over there real quick and please subscribe to that channel. Everything that I post here is going to be going up there. Could be soon. Anyway, big shout out to Trade Pros in Oklahoma City. You may have heard. Those guys have been with us pretty much from the beginning, and we appreciate them re-upping for 2021. How cool is that? I want to say spring is on the way, and that means the weather is going to be changing a lot. So what you need to do is get one of their service agreements. They'll carry you through the whole year. Units going on, shutting off, AC, heater, listen, they've got 3 packages for the service agreements. They're going to work with you to fit your budget. They're like $15 to $18 a month. Why would you not do this? If you've ever had to replace your furnace or your AC, mine's sitting right there. I can tell you, this is going to save you a ton of cash. So call Caleb or Carrie, 405-249-7290, or go to their website, tradeprosokc.com. Okay, Ryan, the Heisman went out last night, and the best player on the Alabama football team won it. Question is, was it the quarterback, Mac Jones? Leads the nation in all kinds of passing categories, about to set some very impressive NCAA records. Or was it the guy that I voted for, the running back, Najee Harris? Led the nation in scoring this year, 27 touchdowns, maybe the most physically talented running back in the country, 6'2", 230, and apparently the guy's got wings. I didn't realize that. Was it either one of those guys? No. It was the wide receiver, Devontae Smith, who led the nation literally in every receiving category and was just ridiculous this season. I think you called him a more elusive Hollywood Brown. I think he's a little bigger, a little stronger, is maybe more explosive than Hollywood. Better vertical jump, when he's reaching up to grab those one-handed balls. The guy's got ridiculous talent. But other than that, Ryan, I like your comparison.
Yeah, I think that when looking back at that Alabama-Florida SEC championship game, just seeing how he weaved through it was reminiscent of, watching Hollywood cut up defenses up and down the field. But like you said, John, he's a little bigger frame, little sturdier. And that's why I kind of was thinking, obviously I'm nowhere near as important as you, John, and don't have that, very important vote there. But he would have been my number one guy just for all those reasons and his ability to just... He's a home run hitter from any area on the field. Absolute game changer. It's really convenient for the Crimson Tide to have more than one of those guys. But honestly, John, I got to say, I was just a little excited to see it not be a quarterback this time. The Heisman Trophy has become a quarterback award, which is fine. And the quarterback's never had a bigger impact on the game of football. But it's nice to kind of see... a bunch of Heisman voters such as yourself recognize that, yeah, there are instances where it's not necessarily a quarterback that's going to take home that glorious stiff arm trophy.
Yeah, man, I got to say, it's been a quarterback award for most of the last 20 years, but I was so happy to see a receiver get it because I'm an old receiver myself, number 88.
There you go.
We never get any real MVP love, the receivers don't. Not since Super Bowl 10 or 11 or something when Swanee won it. I voted for Najee because he had the football in his hands literally 2.5 times more than Devontae did. And like I said in my column last night, where are you going to read that? allsooners.com. I couldn't get past the 27 touchdowns. That's a lot of touchdowns for any year. But listen, Smith, I love that dude. He's very deserving. I think if this would have been 5 years ago, honestly, Mac Jones and Kyle Trask would have finished 1-2. Because the voters used to just give it to the quarterback of the best team. No imagination, no ingenuity, no independent thought, no thinking required. But I think we saw last night that the vote's changing a little bit. Maybe the electorate, the voting body is changing a little bit. You know what, though? Maybe I'm overthinking this. Maybe Devontae Smith is just the best player in the country, and everybody said, well, it's a no-brainer, and that's why he kind of dominated the voting. I saw where Najee got 16 first-place votes, so... me and 15 others. Nice. Ryan, the guy that I put third on my ballot was a guy who had zero chance of winning. I recognized that before I did it. Yet he won the Bronco Nagurski Trophy as the best defensive player in college football. And he's also currently up for the Chuck Bednarik Award as the best defensive player in college football. So, Zaven Collins, the linebacker from Tulsa, 6'4", 260, runs like a deer, third in the country with 4 interceptions. 2 of those were pick sixes. 2 of those were game winners, okay? 1 was in overtime. Had 3 sacks and 4 tackles for loss against Oklahoma State. He was a bad man. He was unanimous on the Football Writers Association All-America team, yet he didn't, and again, the best defensive player in the country, right? Yet he didn't even finish in the top 10 in the Heisman. So, Now we got to look at the Heisman less of a quarterback award, more of an offense-only award, kind of an old boys club. If you play offense, you get the consideration for the Heisman. If you play defense, you get your other awards. Which brings us to 2021. Betting odds came out yesterday on the 2021 Heisman, and right there at the top, 3 different sports books that I looked at. Spencer Rattler, yes, Spencer Rattler. No big deal, right? He started this past season at number 2 and fell off pretty quick. So, yeah, I don't think he got so much as a third-place vote in this year's Heisman. But being the betting favorite on January 5th is hardly a good indicator, right? For what happens in 12 months, right, Ryan? Or am I crazy? Is this kid going to win the Heisman?
Well, I think that if you're just looking at the betting indications, let's just tally up real quick. Let's talk amongst ourselves. How many Heisman trophies has Trevor Lawrence taken home over his career? Because I feel like he was always a guy up there. And surely Tua Tagovailoa won 3 or 4 as well, right, John? Because he was always up there too. Oh, that's right. It is January. Like you said, a lot of stuff can happen. But I think it shows a lot of respect, not just for Lincoln Riley's offense, but what Spencer Rattler did do, and kind of a nod to how he played after that Texas game. Because if you look at all the statistical categories, he was, without a doubt, one of the best quarterbacks in the country this season. The biggest problem, and like you said there, the biggest problem with the Heisman Trophy at times is that he did pick up those 2 early losses. Oklahoma was never truly in the playoff hunt this season, so that kind of removes you from the minds of voters and from the conversation. So Spencer Rattler, I think, should be considered a very legitimate contender, and his betting odds is a nod to how he closed the year, because the way that he closed the year put him up against Kyle Trask. We saw him go up against Kyle Trask. I think you'd give the nod to Spencer Rattler. Put him up against Mac Jones, Trevor Lawrence. He's just as good as any of those guys in the country. So there's no reason why he can't take home Lincoln Riley's 3rd Heisman Trophy since he took over here in Norman. Yeah, I mentioned the lack of insight or forethought maybe by the Heisman voters. I think some of that is, and this is just bettors, remember, this is just odds makers who want to take your money. This isn't Heisman voters, but I do think there's a little bit of a, well, who's Lincoln Riley's quarterback this year? That's who I think is going to win it. There's some of that at play because of the Baker, the Kyler, and then Jalen comes out of Alabama, and look what he does. So anyway, speaking of college football futures, Oklahoma is going to be considered a favorite for the game that's going to be played here in a few days, the national championship game. It's in Indianapolis next year. Despite all those guys we talked about leaving, Ryan, yeah, right? OU's going to win the Big 12 next year again, and I think they're going to be back in the CFP. The semifinals are the Cotton and the Orange next year, so go ahead and book your tickets now. And again, Indianapolis is the championship game. Ryan, am I getting ahead of myself? We don't know who else Oklahoma is going to lose. We don't know who's coming back. We don't know who they're going to add in the transfer portal, which, if you think about it, that speaks for the rest of the country. We don't know anything about what Clemson's going to look like next year, or Alabama could change. Ohio State. Is Oklahoma a playoff team next year? Yeah, I think for sure, and that boils back down to the fact that Spencer Rattler is going to be leaving the charge. The quarterback position is the most impactful on the football field, and if you just run down your usual contenders, Clemson, okay, well, DJ looked good in one game against Notre Dame, but can he replicate that over a season when everyone's prepping for him and not Trevor Lawrence? Alabama, Mac Jones, you have to imagine he's going to want to go to the league and when his stock's as high as it's ever been. Fields, similar situation at Ohio State. So you have the known quantity of a quarterback that can play at a high level. Pair that with Alex Grinch's defense. And John, we're going to have to see it again 1 or 2 more times before we can definitively say this, but if you just go back one offseason, I had questions about this Oklahoma defense. They were losing their most productive player at every level in Neville Gallimore, Kenneth Murray, Parnell Motley, and a lot of the guys on campus at the time were players that the fans didn't feel they were at OU's level when Mike Stoops was in charge. What did Alex Grinch do? He just turned that around into a more complete defense and a much better unit. So yeah, they've lost the 2 Treys. They could potentially lose Ronnie Perkins, all that stuff. But who's to say that another year in this system, another year of what good coaching will do for you, that this defense can't take another step forward? So you got the quarterback in place. You've got what you think is a defense. John, this OU team's made it to the playoff on much less than having a good defense before. There's no reason why they shouldn't be one of the favorites to be one of those 4 teams to make it to the dance. And not only that, but win their first semifinal game and play that game in Indianapolis.
Up next on the SI Sooners podcast, Texas went and did a bunch of Texas stuff. And why can't Oklahoma recruit anymore? Hey, are you a business owner looking to get your product out there to the masses? Let's say you run a hotel in Norman or a car dealership in Oklahoma City or a restaurant in Edmond. Or maybe you're a small online business who creates and sells OU merchandise and you just want Sooner Nation to come sample your wares. Well, then consider advertising in this space right here on the SI Sooners podcast. SI Sooners reaches thousands of readers, viewers, and listeners literally every day. And the SI Sooners podcast is the ideal place to find your next customer. To advertise, send an email to allsoonersi@gmail.com or DM us on Twitter at all_Sooners. Final segment of the SI Sooners podcast. Ryan, before we get to Texas and that recruiting we mentioned, we got to preview the big basketball game at Baylor tonight. I looked it up. Sooners have no chance. No, seriously. Baylor's 9-0. They're blowing everybody out, and they are. Listen, I looked it up. They're first in the Big 12 in almost every statistical category. What? Yeah, they're that good. It's going to be hard. Game time 8:00 tonight on ESPN2. OU is 6-2. They've had a nice start, and they're coming off a really nice home upset victory over West Virginia on Saturday. But Ryan, that West Virginia team had just lost Oscar Tshiebwe. They hadn't figured out how to play without him yet. I think they figured it out at halftime because they almost came all the way back from a big deficit. This is a little different. This Baylor team tonight is strong.
Yeah, and I think something else that is not talked about enough when we speak of West Virginia is it is very difficult for that basketball team specifically to travel and make the rounds in the Big 12. They've been a different team in Morgantown and in the rest of the Big 12 on the road all like the entire time they've been in this conference. Oklahoma will not have that little feather in their cap as they head down to Waco. And I know last year this same Sooners team, pretty much minus Christian Doolittle, was an Austin Reeves 3-pointer at the buzzer away from pulling the upset. But John, I'm like you. I don't know how any team in this conference really is going to match up with Baylor and feel great about coming away with a win. Sure, Baylor's going to lose a game or two in the conference just because you can't be on in this conference every single night. But going through it, look at the matchups. Like the biggest thing that Oklahoma has rolling for them, John, is the depth that they have. You never really know who's going to be on, but that also means if someone's not firing, if Brady Manick continues to struggle with the slump that he's in back-to-back games, not scoring double digits, you've at least got some candidates in an Emoja Gibson. You've got a Victor Uwakor who could come in. Jalen Hill can give you something. And maybe Davion Harmon can continue to play really well. So that'll be what Oklahoma has to hope they can lean on is just, yeah, they're not going to be as good as Baylor at any given position, but you got to hope that just by sheer will of platooning a ton of guys that can contribute, maybe they can make it close and make something magical happen down the stretch down in Waco.
Okay, so let's get back to football. Texas, man. What a weekend for Texas. They fired Mr. Mediocre himself, Tom Herman. And this after Chris Del Conte, the athletic director, saying, no, Tom is our coach. And then he even went so far as to tell the Austin American Statesman, clarification, Tom will be our coach in 2021, and he even used the words next season. So his little word soup that he was playing, trying to get a command of the English language without really saying what he meant. Ryan, he lied. He lied. Tom Herman was fired. Now, I fully expected this. I did. But only if you get somebody like Urban Meyer. Not the guy they hired. Not Steve Sarkisian. You don't fire mediocre and replace it with mediocre. Ryan, I looked it up. And in 5 years at Washington and 2 years, 1.5 years at USC, you know what Steve Sarkisian's best season was? 9-4 at USC. That was before he was fired for coming to work drunk and cussing out the boosters at a booster club event. The guy has never won 10 games. He's never been to a big-time bowl game. His winning percentage is something like 56 or 54. The best he's ever done in conference play is 6-3. He did that one time. He went 5-4, 4 times at Washington. Ryan, I know OU fans are going to miss Tom Herman, but I also get the feeling they're really ecstatic about this hire.
Yeah, and like you said, John, this just doesn't make a lot of sense. Here's the only thing. I've been reading a ton of Texas content, which, by the way, just shout out to that just athletics department for continuing to just pay the bills everywhere. But it sounds like the last straw was there's a report or two out there that the Texas players themselves had started to negatively recruit against the existing coaching staff and in Tom Herman. God. If that is true, I understand that like Texas is going to take a lot of heat for this, as they should, because this hire is puzzling, but you got to make the move. If the players are actively telling recruits, do not come to Texas, like you have to move on. I understand that, but Steve Sarkisian, man, this just reeks of you tried to hit the home run with Urban Meyer, you missed. You tried to look around elsewhere, and you're like, okay, well, Lincoln Riley's really good at offense, so we need to find that next offensive mind that can hopefully compete with him, and I guess you just go to the guy that's lifted most of Lincoln Riley's offense and rolled it out at Alabama. Like, that's really the only place I think of Sarkisian having this explosive offense, John, and that's because he has the best players. Like, the dude got canned in Atlanta in the NFL because he couldn't cut it, and then, like you said, he had all those troubles in the Pac-12. And when you talk about on-the-field production, John, it's not like the Pac-12 was the SEC during that time. It's not like he has a ton of juggernauts. You had to beat Oregon. You had to beat USC when you were at Washington. He couldn't do any of those things. I get that it's the hot name right now, but if that's your hot name, that's more of an indictment on this current crop of, hot coaches.
Yeah, you're probably right. Okay, so, man, you know what? As long as we're busting Texas chops, let's be fair. Lincoln Riley and the Sooners struck out 4 times in the past month in recruiting. Emeka Egbuka, Bryce Foster, Kamar Wheaton, and latest one, Tristan Lee. They all had OU, we think, in their final 2. And all 4 of those guys, every one of them, 5 stars. Every one of them an SI All-American. Every one of them chose to go somewhere else. Ryan, we've been saying this for like a decade now that Oklahoma's not going to win another national championship until they start landing some of these big 5-star guys. And they got, they got Caleb Williams. They got a quarterback. They got Spencer Rattler, obviously 5-star quarterback. And they got plenty of 5-star receivers. And they got good players coming. Don't get me wrong. I like their 2021 recruiting class. They have the number 10 class in the country. And they still only have 16 kids signed. But listen, Barry Switzer told me this years ago. When it comes to the big guys, the guys that get up front, get down in 3-point stance, put their hand in the dirt, those guys are the ones who kick people's ass, basically, is the way he said it. You need those players to play on a national championship type level. The big bruisers that you see throughout the SEC and Clemson and sometimes at Ohio State, those guys are still not coming to Oklahoma. What's it going to take, Ryan?
Look, John, you're not going to be satisfied with this answer, but Oklahoma might have to win a national championship. Like, I was looking through and realized I know that Oklahoma just had the social media blitz of celebrating their last national championship. John, that national championship happened before any of the players they're recruiting now were born. All these guys know of Oklahoma, fair or not, is they're a team that every 3 or 4 years is good enough to make it to the national championship in the BCS era and lose, or good enough to be the 4th team in college football, but not really close to that top 3. That Baker Mayfield Rose Bowl year is really the only time they had a chance to make it to the national championship just based off the rosters. Look, I think Oklahoma has the talent and the coaching on offense to win a national championship. That defense has come a long way. Don't forget, we're just 2 or 3 years removed, John, from fans just praying that the Sooners had an average defense. Not a good defense, just an average defense so that they could compete. I think that Oklahoma has the recipe, especially when you talk about what people are losing across the country at Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson. They have the recipe to compete, win, make it to the national championship game. I don't know if they can win it, but I truly think to close some of these top-end recruits, they're going to have to show they can win in the playoffs, because for all the exposure the playoff gets you, Oklahoma and Notre Dame have been the 2 punching bags of the playoff era, and they're going to have to flip that switch at some point to close these final guys.
Yeah. You know what I think they need? They need some bar bouncers on the offensive and defensive lines. They got some They got some dudes on the defensive line, and they've had some dudes, obviously, look at their NFL production that they put into the league from the offensive line. But, you know, when you look at some of the players that they played against, some of those Georgia players, some of those Alabama players, some of those Clemson players from back in 2015, oh my gosh, a couple of the LSU guys stood out last year against the Oklahoma. You know, we're talking about the battles in the trenches. So that's what they're going to need. Or, like you said, they're going to need to do what they did in 2000, which is completely shock and surprise everybody and win a national championship, and then the big recruits will start coming. I don't know which one, chicken or the egg, right?
Exactly.
Let's finish up with the man, the myth, the legend himself, Baker Mayfield. Damn. Baker Mayfield. You take the Cleveland Browns to the playoffs in your third season as an NFL quarterback. It's just unreal. 20 years now we're going on Cleveland just absolutely not being like not in the playoffs, not being like mediocre. They suck. They're terrible. I remember we ran a story this past offseason about Gil Brandt saying that Baker was going to have a breakout year after a tough 2019. He did exactly that. He had a breakout year. Cleveland plays at Pittsburgh this weekend in the NFL freaking playoffs. And here's the thing. Yes, it's just the playoffs. It's not the Lombardi Trophy yet, so he's not on Patrick Mahomes' level. Let's just say it like it is. But think about how much further he had to go than Mahomes did. The Browns were 1-31 in the 2 years before Baker got there. 1-31. They've been through 4 head coaches since Baker got there, 3 offensive coordinators, 2 GMs. It's just the epitome of a poorly run franchise. And yet, Baker comes there as the number 1 overall pick. And after a couple of pretty decent drafts, he literally changes the mindset of the club, the team, the franchise, the whole city of Cleveland. I mean, Ryan, we saw it for ourselves in Norman, Oklahoma. That dude has got an iron will.
Yeah, you don't want to be on Baker Mayfield's list, but it's taken a little bit longer than some people may have thought. But I think all the way back to the NFL Combine, Baker's coming out, and the response he gave when reporters asked him point blank, why should you be the Cleveland quarterback? Like, why is that appealing to you? All that stuff. And Baker Mayfield himself said, I'm the guy. I'm the only guy that can go in there and change the culture. That's what Baker Mayfield was at Oklahoma. Baker Mayfield, and of course Lincoln Riley coming in, they saved the end of Bob Stoops' legacy and how he may forever be remembered at Oklahoma because he himself changed the culture and willed that offense. You think back to that Tennessee game, his coming out party, terrible for 3 quarters. He willed that offense into being good enough to win that football game. He was the heartbeat of the Sooners. It's no surprise to anyone who has spent any time watching Baker Mayfield play that the city of Cleveland loves him. But John, I gotta say, it may not go his way. I know there have been some COVID issues. It looks like head coach Stefanski's not going to be able to even coach this game, things like that. But Baker Mayfield, petty until the end. I don't know if you saw this, but Colin Cowherd coming out of the draft. I know Baker Mayfield's favorite enemy, Colin Cowherd, compared, Sam Darnold to a Maserati and Baker Mayfield to like a Civic or something. The audible in that game against Pittsburgh for Baker Mayfield's game-sealing run. Do you know what that audible was, John?
I do.
It was a Maserati. Petty to the end. Baker Mayfield. Unmatched.
Thank you, Colin Cowherd. Listen to the SI Sooners podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google, iHeart, or wherever you get your podcasts, or on your Amazon-enabled device. Just say, Alexa, play the SI Sooners podcast. Or just go to our website, allsooners.com, click on the player, and listen on your phone, your tablet, or your computer. And remember, you can always watch the video version of my YouTube channel, John Hoover Media. For Ryan Chapman, I'm John Hoover. See you guys.